While we have been doing well, we don't suffer from what I call intellectual arrogance. India as a country, DIY is not culturally, we are not used to it.
It's easy for people like you and I to at times talk about change and embracing change. It has to be embraced by people.
Firstly, we look for founders who have a philosophy of building to last rather than building to sell.
I do somewhere feel that innovation, R&D spend will define the future. Scale is very, very important. Branding is very, very important, no question about it.
India is a market that will never compromise taste for health.
Welcome back to Future Unplugged, where we dive into the future of business with India's sharpest minds and most influential leaders. I'm your host, Sanjeev Krishan, and today's guest is someone who has been instrumental in shaping the Indian FMCG narrative, especially in times of rapid transformation. Please welcome Saugata Gupta, CEO and Managing Director of Marico, one of India's most admired and agile consumer goods companies. Saugata, you've been anchoring a brand which is a legacy brand in India. And I must admit that in the day and age that we live in, with all the disruptions that are going around with us, there's always this conflict between old and new, and how does the old continue to stay relevant? How have you fashioned your journey at Marico and Marico's future journey over the last few years?
So I think if you look at it, you're absolutely right, and that the fact that we had a very interesting portfolio where 90% of the portfolio we are number one, 95% of the portfolio are number two. I think what was the thing what is very important, and especially if you have legacy brands or operate in categories which have high penetration, there comes a point in time which you realize that the future growth is not secured. And therefore, sometime I still remember, in 2019, I would think, when I was in US doing some investor meetings, there was a lot of talk about how, D2C brands or digital brands have disrupted incumbent CPG companies in US. And it was just not digital brands, it was the power of the retailers. And therefore, a lot of incumbent companies have faced growth pressures, whether it's in growth and top line, bottom line, and therefore impact on P.
Right.
And that was a time I think we had just about wetting our feet. We had taken a minority stake in this, Beardo. And we started this, and that thought process came in that if you don't diversify or transform, I think your future is not secured. The other thing that happens is that you get complacent not only in leadership, you get complacent and especially what I call a lazy incumbent. A lazy incumbent is someone who makes supernormal profit, doesn't want to innovate or reinvent.
Right.
And those are the two traps one gets into, and that is the two traps we avoided.
Right.
The COVID was I think something which we actually pivoted towards foods as another diversification agenda. But I think to me, that has been the thing that never be get complacent in leadership.
Right.
So with what I believe, I think there is something for careers and organizations that what got you here will not get you to the next level. And that discovery has to happen at the right time, and it shouldn't be late.
Yeah, in fact, there's a wonderful book which said that what got you here will not, save the future for you. And I think that's some very good messages out there. And, you spoke about leadership, and I'll come back to that in a bit. But, you spoke about Beardo, and there are others like True Element and other things that you have done. Some of these for a vintage brand might have seemed unconventional things to do, but you were embracing the shifts that were happening, and from a distribution standpoint, from a product standpoint, etc. How hard or easy was it to drive that shift in the organization to embrace some of these new things?
I think two things happened. First, one of the things that stands apart in our leadership, while we have been doing well, we don't suffer from what I call intellectual arrogance. And one of the things we say that it's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, tell me more. It's okay to accept that you don't know or you made a mistake and you learn from it. So one of the things we realize is that, if I want to really embrace digital brands, something which we don't know, we need to learn.
Right.
And therefore, we went into the unique model. Actually, Beardo, we made a minority stake initially. For all the other brands, we made a majority stake, but we let the founders run it. We let the founders run it for 3 years. They know the brands much better than us. We learn from them and slowly integrate. Having said that, we also kept them outside. And therefore, this thing about learning agility and humility and empowerment, which is part of our culture, perhaps helped them. Because if you are a control freak and you think that I know everything, I am a big daddy, you don't let that space to those founders. Because at the end of the day, I think accepting that I don't know and we need to learn perhaps helped. Right. And I think keeping it outside what we did is we didn't Mariconize those businesses. In fact, they have a different set of talent, different set of operating model, different set of compensation, processes, everything which is different. We just control three things. We control capital allocation. We control portfolio in some way. You can't get into everything.
Right.
And the third thing we control is regulatory and quality, which is basically something which is a reputation.
Right.
The rest, I think they have the freedom to operate.
Yeah. So I think from some great points there, particularly agility, humility, which are of course very, very important. But let me also ask you, when you embrace, you are a listed company. There are obviously, and why only a listed company? We all have near-term pressures, whether it's a quarter, whether it's a half year or a year, etc. And there is always this thing about short-term outcomes, which may be important for the executives. But there is also this thing about the long-term strategy, the long-term vision, and where the business could go. How do you manage this thing between short-term and long-term goals and ambitions?
First of all, I will first tell you, I think one of the things we look for our leaders in Marico is what I call polarity management. Mm-hmm. And the polarity management is managing the short-term and the long-term, managing speed with excellence, sometimes quality with cost. Right. They are seemingly bipolar things, but you have to manage. I think on long-term and short-term, we have a very basic philosophy that at the end of the day, you have to play both. Right. Ultimately, 4 quarters make a year, right. And in a 5-year term, 5 years make a... Right. And therefore, you need to learn to build, repair and fly the plane together. And therefore, as long as you're not compromising the long term for achieving a short term goal, it's fine. And I think it's precisely to these digital brands. One of the things we were clear is that we are a listed company, we have a balance sheet and we have a P&L. And therefore, it is extremely important to have ambition greater than resources. Right. A lot of time we find, resources, when resources are greater than ambition, you get into a cash burn mode. And therefore, we are okay to grow 20-25% as long as, for example, Beardo at, 200 plus levels now, it's almost a double digit EBITDA. Right. We have another business which has broken even. Right. So for us, you have to do an and not an or. And obviously, there is a temptation, there's a pressure that, you give me 100 crores cash, I'll deliver you 60% growth, but I don't want that 60% growth. Right. I'm happy with a 30% growth as long as it happens sustainably and profitably.
Right. And does it constrain some of these new entrepreneurs, which you said, you let them be, because, many of them grew up having, large pools of capital available to them from venture funds and otherwise. And then let's say they join you and you're telling them that we want you to do well, we want you to grow, but at a particular pace, capital allocation is with you. Does it constrain them in any way, or are they able to embrace the rhythm?
I think firstly we look for founders who have a philosophy of building to last rather than building to sell.
Right.
I think that's the first thing we look for those founders. Okay. And we look for people who are commercially savvy. They know also something called a P&L and bottom line. Our earnout is just not on top line. Our earnout is on handing over the high quality business. Right. Now, what they get from us as a strategic investor is the entire resource of the Marico mothership is available to them for managing cost, managing processes, and actually they're embracing it. And therefore, I strongly believe that what is available to all these people from the Marico mothership is unique, which are not a standalone, digital brand will not get it.
Right.
And I think it works perfectly.
So let me ask you the question in another way. Eventually, you'd like to, of course, it has to be accredited to the Marico balance sheet, but I'm sure there are learnings which the mother business, Marico, takes back from some of these businesses in terms of processes, in terms of agility to market, and the way they distribute the products, etc. And at some point in time, presumably in the near future, they will get merged, if I may, effectively. I'm saying not just legal entity if they are separate, but more in terms of people, processes, and then they'll have to embrace the larger organization. Have you seen any of these so far? And if so, any learnings from that?
I think on that we could have done a better job in terms of picking up learnings into the Marico fold. I think one thing I realized, there are two distinct models. The what I call engine one, which is the core Marico, is about a repeatable model of scale and efficiency, where you work with power brands, mass distribution, mass marketing, of course, digital.
Right.
I'll just give you an example. The cycle time for a new product development in a Marico 1
Right.
is maybe 8 to 10 months or 12 months. There it may be 20 days.
Right.
Or 30 days. And therefore it is about think big, start small, either scale up fast or kill fast. Now these two models are very, in fact, I'm finding talent also struggling to embrace a talent from 1 to 2 or 2 to 1. Having said that, I must tell you this story that the person who handled, when we picked 100% stake in Beardo in 2020, the guy who was given in charge of Beardo, who was the first business head, was actually a management trainee of ours who has worked in legacy brands. And he superbly adapted himself. Not everybody can do it. Right. So I think maybe that learning back can accelerate. And,
right.
and I think I would tend to believe that we can do a better job there. It's doing okay, but the fact that the core Marico adapt some of the agility and some of the far more digitally savviness today and actually start launching organic digital brands from the Marico stable successfully. This is something which I believe we should be able to do, but we haven't been able to do successfully so far.
Right. Saugata, when you look back over your tenure now, and as I said, navigating the old with the new, there must have been a situation or two, and I'm not looking for specifics, which you would have found it a bit hard to navigate, let me put it this way, or where people's adoption of what you would like would have been tougher, because I do believe that it's easy for people like you and I to at times talk about change and embracing change. It has to be embraced by people, even technology for that matter, and we'll talk about technology in a bit. But what's been your experiment with change, if I may?
So I think I have sometimes learned a little hard way. Each organization goes through a phase.
Right.
And normally, perhaps you require a kind of a refresh button, in terms of teams, ways of doing work. Right. And I'll give you an example. There is this new theory that, when an organization moves from pre-IPO, unlisted to a listed, right, the team that takes it to a IPO stage versus post-listing, you need a different set of team, because it would be different factors. And this has been a proven model. It could be also that, a lot of people make nice money and they get complacent, they have nothing to look forward to. Also, running a listed company versus unlisted company is a different thing. So similarly, any organization in their different phases. And I also believe each new leader should choose its own people. It's not about loyalty, but alignment. I think a lot of people demand personal loyalty, but I think in an organization, it's about alignment. Because I'll give you an example on digital. Mm-hmm. If you really look at digital, and if your top management is not digitally savvy, you can't drive digital transformation. And I'm seeing the same thing in AI adoption also today.
Yeah.
So we did something called a bottoms up, which was we picked up the 5-6 really talented digital savvy kids in our system and started reverse mentoring. Right. There was resistance to it.
Right.
Including I got reverse mentored. I mean, I was not on LinkedIn or I was not on any social media. Of course, I'm still a little bit, social media shy. But, at least I'm doing it for the organization today. Okay.
Right.
And to me, even this adoption to AI, because there is this certain fear in AI, like, for example, that suddenly the middle management will go.
Right.
So I'm seeing resistance in AI adoption and a lot of things. Like, I'll give you a simple thing. I mean, I see some of the brands, they do things like they're developing packaging through AI. They're developing content through AI. Now, yes, is there a fear that there could be job losses or something, or you don't need some people, or even analytics, through AI?
Saugata, you spoke about AI, you spoke about digital transition, and you spoke about the human elements and the resistance to change, which I think is very, very powerful. But let me just now come to the topic of AI and technology per se. I mean, without a doubt, that is the biggest disruptor that all of us are facing, and I think now more and more of us are convinced that it is here to stay. Many of us believe it is almost like the internet. That's the kind of difference that will make to our lives, etc. the way people produce, the way people consume, and so on and so forth. But now we are just saying that, okay, the one thing is efficiency gains through the process, etc. Because there's deep analytics available, etc. It's also about new product creation, which is now the thinking. And now the thinking is that, okay, maybe it should help us scale businesses to begin with, but then eventually it should also help us innovate. So where are you in that journey at Marico, Saugata, if I may?
So as we speak, actually, we are in the process of looking at doing a kind of a assessment of an AI maturity. We have a fair idea, but it's always nice to benchmark. I think there are 3 areas which I believe in a consumer goods company I can help. The first is the entire area of consumer insighting and innovation. Something very simple I can tell you, which we have just started and I was quite excited about it. As you know, India has a huge number of languages, and given that we sell mass brands, we do a lot of consumer connect with different local languages. The earlier system was a simple thing like somebody used to translate, listen to all the tapes of conversation. Today we're using AI, and actually within, I think I'm told that earlier it used to take, after everything, 7 days, 14 days, within 2 hours I'm getting a kind of a distilled insight, which on consumers, which earlier it used to be a third party listening in, translating. The basic thing is that. Yeah. Or today if I do A/B testing on packaging, I can generate 30 options.
Right.
Things like predictive analytics,
yeah.
Forecasting, your predictive analytics on attrition we are doing. So we are doing a lot of, I think AI helps you in taking high speed, high quality decision making.
Right.
The moment you think about AI equal to automation equal to job losses, it's completely different.
Right.
It gives you high quality, high speed decision making, makes you efficient. I think it can do a lot more on innovation, even on quality. I've seen sometimes simple use of AI. AI is nothing very rocket science. Even in the production line, some of the stuff which I've seen, I think it's as amazing. This one, the thing is that you have to have some use cases of belief and then adopt.
Yeah.
And today, I believe there is a huge opportunity as far as this company is concerned, and we are looking at a next stage. And one thing helps, again, as I said, it starts at the top. Given my background in engineering and this one, and I am an analytics buff, so it helps. I love analytics because I believe analytics gives you taking better quality decision.
Right.
And it's nothing. Analytics is about any data has outliers.
Right.
You decide what drives, what are the causalities of good performance, what are causalities of bad performance, and then take a call. It's nothing very...
Yeah. Yeah. But let me just ask you one more question on this aspect. Customer preferences and tastes have changed on the one hand. Likewise, our people, and we have been talking about employment levels in India, but we've also been talking about skilling levels in India. And you did say that earlier. I think it's about not what you envision AI can do for you with the business, but it is again for the people to be able to embrace it. And what do you think are the investments that are needed by corporation like yours for your employees at large, not just the management team, but employees at large, to be able to embrace it, and put it as part of their daily lives? And also, is there something that you think you can take to your customers which is a bit differentiated?
So I think, the thing is that how do you generate simple systems, and this one which adoption is important.
Yeah.
To give you an example, I think India as a country, DIY is not culturally we are not used to it,
Yeah.
Even there are 2 guys standing near a vending machine, sometimes in the airport, and we like doing that. And that's a concept what I call disguised unemployment.
Right.
So I think we are struggling a little bit with that. For example, we had a DIY system for all our distributors. So therefore, one of the learning is that how do you create something which is a simple system?
Yeah.
Like for example, we later found out that if it is a PC based system, today's the new generation distributors are not somebody who's sitting in the distribution office whole day. You have to create a system which is so I think how do you create a simple system which, because any change of habit shouldn't be tough.
Right.
And therefore it is not about training, it is about just how do you incorporate that within a habit.
Right.
I'll just give you an example. It's like, for example, if today a food delivery app and a grocery delivery app, it's the same app, versus if you have two different apps, the company which has it on the same app has a better chance of adoption.
Surely. Got it. Now, Saugata, I was just again reflecting on what you were saying. We talked about technology as a disruption. There are multiple other disruptions that we are facing at this point in time. While a significant part of your business is domestic, we are also living in a time when there is an overbearing feeling of nationalism which is pervading the world at this point in time. And that might create challenges to businesses who intend to be more global, whether it is in terms of the cost of delivery at the customer site in an overseas location because of tariffs and so on and so forth, or because of how foreign brands, quote unquote, are perceived, etc. at this point in time. How do you see the impact of all these things? And nothing specific. And I mean, I don't want you to necessarily respond on tariffs on specific, but generally because there is a significant Indian diaspora outside, whether it is in Africa, Southeast Asia, even the Western markets, etc. Do you think that for somebody like yourselves, this is going to be a challenge in times ahead?
So one of the things we have been clear about is in our international business footprint. When we started off, obviously it catered to the Indian diaspora.
Right.
But then we are present now. We are clear that we will be only in emerging markets. We do sell in developed markets because right now, as you were rightly, market like US, there is a strong Indian population. The other interesting thing, it's even in the entire Western markets, coconut or a virgin coconut oil is seen as a superfood. Therefore, there is a equity to be had, to be leveraged. But we now cater to in our hubs, like for example, whether it's in Southeast Asia, whether it's in Bangladesh, we have a strong business in Middle East and North Africa, South Africa, extremely a portfolio which caters to, which is a global portfolio.
Right.
And having said that, I think it is our dream. And in fact, recently, I think Uday Kotak mentioned in this one that there are hardly any, global brands, consumer brands. Yeah. And I think one of the things we're trying to do, can we make Parachute a global brand?
Right.
And,
wonderful.
Now, will it be a big scaled up brands in developed markets? No. But today what has happened thanks to e-commerce, just like in India, the entry barriers of the founder driven brands have reduced and they can do it. I mean, we can try.
Got it. Now, one of the things, I mean, if that aspiration, and I would simply love that if that were to happen, and I hope it happens, when you make Parachute an international brand. But you've focused a huge amount on quality over the years, and that's why you've got that branding and the premium pricing that you're able to drive as a result of it. I think it'll be wonderful to get your perspective, Saugata, on what keeps the quality component going in the brand, in the Parachute brand, and any other products that you have, and both in terms of investments, innovation, and more importantly, today, when you think about, let's say, being globally regarded, navigating the taste preferences which may be different in other parts of the world.
So first of all, quality is concerned, obviously consumer centricity has to have value in the organization, and everybody is responsible for quality. And one of the things we do is that if you are consumer centric, you will never compromise, again, the thought process which we have, that never compromise the long term for the short term, that do cost management by somewhere impacting quality. There are always, in any product design, things which don't deliver value you can take out. Right. But something which delivers value you should never take out. Like for example, I'll give you the Parachute coconut oil. There are a lot of today Me Too's, a lot of smaller brands, a lot of competitors, but that aroma of that has never changed. And therefore, or say, I'll give another example. Saffola masala oats, again catered to Indian taste. Now, when we entered oats, we realized that oats is a Western concept. Although in the South adoption was good, people in India don't like cold breakfast and they don't like bland. They want something savory. So we converted that into masala, and then we actually converted a breakfast category into what I call in between meal snacking, because then the total addressable market expanded totally.
Right.
One of the learnings I had, and we had a product failure, we tried some snacking in 2010. India is a market that will never compromise taste for health. And they will never pay for health also. So if I look at it, anything which is diet or anything this one, there is a price elasticity 20-25%. You are neither willing to pay a premium for health, neither going to sacrifice taste for health.
Right.
Now that means you have to work within those boundary conditions and design stuff.
Right.
So therefore Saffola, when it expanded into foods, I'm pre-sold because I have a guardrail on health. I have to start developing and saying, how can I maximize on taste?
Right.
And therefore the same thing we do, I think, everywhere. The approach has to be consumer first.
Right. Right. One follow-up on that one, and I do want to talk about it. India, if you look at the overall numbers from an innovation standpoint, I don't think we do so well, etc. I mean, you have invested a lot in quality, you pride yourself, etc. Any suggestions that you would have for India to be up on the innovation R&D game? And I'm coming to it again and again because I do somewhere feel that innovation, R&D spend will define the future. Scale is very, very important. Branding is very, very important, no question about it. But it does seem that unless I can innovate and continue to spend a lot, which will mean that I have to spend a lot more on R&D, that will be the differentiator in times to come. So any suggestions that you would have for broader ecosystem?
I think a long-term view, investing behind it, and see, jugaad can be a virtue, jugaad can be also not a virtue, So I think somewhere jugaad is about adaptability.
Right.
It is not about making shortcuts.
Right.
And I think that is something, and I think it's just not, one is investment behind R&D, other is design thinking.
Yeah.
I think design thinking is something which is, and I think which is something which, and let me be, and we have the best brains in the world, and when we work in US, it's Indians, we produce the best.
Yeah.
So therefore, there is no reason why.
Yeah.
I think we need to create an enabling environment, more infrastructure and other things, and also having a little more long-term view about it.
Right.
And yes, I think we can do more. If we want to do more, we can do. Look at some of the technology adoption, whether it's Aadhaar or the entire vaccine deployment which we did. So if you want to do things in terms of mass scale in a cost-effective way and automated this one, we can do it.
Yeah.
If you look at today, Indian airports, when you land and the immigration waiting time, and by the time, it's one of the best in the world.
Best in the world.
So it's, if you want, you can do it. It's not that we don't have the ability to do it.
Yeah. So it's about citizen centricity, I suppose, and client centricity also, I suppose, and getting the focus on what is possibly most important. So Saugata, let me ask you another question. If you look at the time that you've spent in the industry at large through your career, invariably for each one of us, I suppose, there is always a time when things don't go to desire, or there may be just a fork in the road, so to speak. And invariably, I can just say from my own experience that is always a huge learning for me, and makes me reflect and pause and do things a bit differently. Has there been a moment like that in your career which you would like to share?
I think absolutely. I think there has been, I think there are 2-3 things which is the biggest learning has been, you don't get emotional about something, a project or even an M&A or anything, which is you, and about some people calls.
Right.
It's better to do cut losses. And these are the cases what happens when you get emotional about either a person, it could be a selection or a promotion, or it could be either an M&A or a product launch.
Right.
I think that embrace that reality and cut loss and stop loss.
Right.
And to me, whenever I have not taken the decision, an organization suffered or other things suffered.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful what you just said, and I think we cannot get a lot of emotion. There has to be a lot of heart in the way we do things, but in your decision making, we have to keep some of these things aside, and I think that's a great message. But Saugata, again, over the years, as you have, you're heading a large organization at this point in time. So let me ask you another question there. Are there things that you had to unlearn? Because, we keep coming across so many things, situations, people, objects which may, be desirable from a business standpoint, which may be, in some ways create more productivity. But to learn the new, at times they say that you have to unlearn a few. Is that something that you believe in?
I think absolutely. I think in terms of our approach, like I wanted to win every time,
Right.
And I think one of the things one of my coaches told me that there are certain things, let it be.
Right.
And therefore, how do you add value in things which you don't really know, and you pick it up and trust others to deliver?
Right.
And I think the other thing is that at the end of the day is that I think if we look at international businesses, each business or each country has a different culture. We work in Southeast Asia versus Middle East versus Africa. Each one is how do you culturally adopt and and then get the best out of that set of people?
Right. I get it. And I think I can relate to that as well. Because at times it may not be the easiest to get your team together, and and I'm just thinking that for instance there have been instances where you want to share a few things with your teams and people, but you can't share a whole lot with them, and hence you might seem cryptic, you might seem almost misunderstood at times, and there may be a lack, if I may call it so, of faith and trust which might build in. And again, talking about management and talking about people, because we all deal with them all the time. Has there been situations like these for you, Saugata, where, you want to do the right thing, you're obviously doing the right things, but maybe you're misunderstood in the moment and you've had to deal with a lot of, at times, negativity, or lack of trust and so on and so forth, and how have you embraced some of those situations if they've arisen?
Okay, so let me give you a broad this one to it. See, one of my management philosophies is that I like to work with adults. Okay,
Right.
So you can't expect parenting in office.
Wonderful.
Now the way we look at it is my job is to provide you with resources for you to win.
Yeah.
I can be your lifeguard, but don't expect me to swim with you every day.
Wonderful.
Okay. And therefore, I think a lot of people expect that, because they come from a certain culture. And so if you come to me with a problem, please come with me the 4 solutions or use me as a resource.
Got it.
For example, I always say that, if there's a layered organization, we are a very empowered, we need to take high-speed, high-quality decisions. There is no point at each level, if I'm giving you an analogy of food, a fully cooked dish, because if you keep on doing that and then you come to the head chef says this doesn't taste at all well,
Right.
You start from the beginning. So can you cook together? So how do you use your supervisor or your boss as a resource
Right.
for a generative conversation as opposed to using that person for, what I call, but putting a rubber stamp that this is okay.
Got it.
And therefore, I think we have had these kind of situations where I expect people to be adults here. In my organization, we believe each leader has to have an owner's mindset.
Right.
And we define owner's mindset in a very interesting way. A lot of people relate to it in Mumbai. So the way you treat when you own a house versus when you lease a house, you treat that house slightly differently.
Yeah.
And therefore, owner's mindset is this is your own company, it's your own money.
Yeah.
And therefore, how do you do that? And yes, there has been sometimes that leads to trust issues, because at the end of the day, and also other thing is that I believe my philosophy has always been what you say, what you get. It's about tough love, which I give to my team. I believe a job of a leader is to create more leaders and not followers.
Sure.
And therefore, if you don't expect parenting,
Wonderful.
see, as parents, what do? Irrespective of this one, you say you are the best to your kid.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you can't be doing that to your team out.
Right. I think that's so wonderful. And very powerful, Saugata. I mean, I think all of us can learn from that and embrace that a little bit. So, almost my last question on this segment. And so if you had to choose between talent and attitude in your organization or in a person or somebody that you are coaching, or suggest one over the other, which one would you?
I think attitude in terms of whether it's self-awareness, humility, authenticity, learning, agility is far more important.
Right.
Functional expertise can be built.
Right.
Okay. And to me, I have realized that disengaged people or toxic people actually create far more harm.
Right.
And And if you decide that things are not going to change,
Right.
and belief is the biggest thing to me.
Right.
And I think the other thing is that, I'll give you an example. I firmly believe that hunger has to come from within.
Right.
You can't create. So I am not this thing about you do, 200 training hours and this person. Ultimately, has to come from within.
Right.
Right. And so, for example, I had yesterday, I have something called a FaceTime, which is basically a town hall. It was slightly senior leaders, we were doing it yesterday. And somebody said, why don't you create structured forums for us to learn from digital businesses or some international business? I said, who's stopping you from picking a phone or writing a mail? So we have one of the values we used to have called boundaryless behavior. From learning. Why do I need that this day of the month there will be a structured learning session?
But I mean, from your perspective, as you think about India, because we are obviously very big on the India opportunity, we believe that if we have some very good years ahead, maybe even geopolitically and otherwise, India seems to be in a good position. We are a huge consumption market. You are in the middle of it. How do you see the India opportunity?
I think we are invest to grow markets. So the belief and, don't get bothered about short term, play for the long term. And secondly, I think it's about fierce prioritization. See, market attractiveness doesn't necessarily give you right to win. You need to play in things where you have a right to win.
Right.
And lastly, while people talk about culture, people talk about strategy, I think execution is extremely important. To me, that doing execution day in and day out, I think is the most important thing. I would say if we can really up the execution. And lastly, I think sometimes in all this, because of you see lots of opportunities, resource allocation goes wrong. And resource is not about money. There are three resources. One is share of mind. So management bandwidth, people, I think sometimes underestimate management bandwidth. Second is talent. Where you put your talent. For example, if e-com is the growth and digital is the growth, I should invest behind that. Versus something which is business as usual, I should actually cut my talent cost there. Versus putting, invest ahead of the curve in that. And the last is money. And I think resource allocation is another thing which we need to sharpen much more.
Yeah, I think what you said about execution is the key, is most important, because you can make all kinds of fancy strategies, etc. And hopefully zero in on one and say that this is going to be my mantra for the future. But unless you can execute on it day in, day out, razor sharp focus, without razor sharp focus, that strategy might mean nothing. So Saugata, on that note, it's been a wonderful conversation, but I do want to ask you one final question. And that goes to the spirit of entrepreneurship in India that is there. And you have embraced it. You've embraced some of them in the past. Possibly we'll do more in the future. But if there was to be one message that you would want to leave to a future entrepreneur in India, what would that be?
I think being hungry, being passionate, never give up, and always have ambition greater than resource.
Oh.
Because you have to have an ambition greater than resource.
Wonderful, wonderful. Saugata, has been wonderful conversing with you. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That brings us to the end of another episode of Future Unplugged. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back soon with more conversations and decode the future of business and India's most forward-looking leaders. Until then, stay curious, stay inspired.